The basic curriculum model that we looked at is one for really starting from the beginning. But, of course, most of us, perhaps all of us, already have a curriculum. And so the question that is perhaps more important is, do we wish to modify our curriculum in any way? Do we wish to change it? Or perhaps we're very happy with it as it is. But situations usually change over time, and therefore we may need to alter our curriculum to some extent. So let's look at some ways that we can do that. Basically, we would still use our interactive linear model, the basic model of curriculum design. It's really a cycle in a way, because it allows us to evaluate our program in the light of our needs, and to then go back and make changes or modifications if we wish. So basically the approach is to evaluate our present curriculum in the light of our present situation. And the TE curriculum that you are now using may have been very carefully planned. You may have done a good situation analysis, found the needs and addressed them. On the other hand, some programs perhaps started without a lot of planning, simply in terms of what was available, which is, of course, very understandable. So we might want to ask ourselves some of the questions that I have suggested here. Do we believe that our present TE curriculum is meeting the needs of our students, our churches, our communities? How do we know? That's an important question. How do we know? Is it fully contextualized? Thinking back to Frida's talk earlier, is there more that we'd like to do to contextualize it? Are there any events or experiences that have happened in our country that suggest that we need to make some changes to address those, perhaps? Are our graduates living and serving the Lord as we would wish? Has our TE program made a real difference in their lives and their ministries? Again, how do we know? It's always good to ask ourselves that question. And then we can ask a few other questions as well, more specific. Since we started using our present TE curriculum, has our target group changed in any way? Or have we added a new target group? That might mean we need to modify the curriculum. Or some of us may wish to start a different level, another level of our curriculum. Have the needs in our churches or communities changed in any way since we started the program? Have our objectives or outcomes for our program changed? Or do we feel we need to change them? Is the academic level of our courses suitable for most of our students? We often hear that people who are well educated still appreciate basic courses and they can learn from them, so that's good. But we may feel that perhaps if we have some very basic courses, we also have some students with more educational background who perhaps would gain more from a higher level, or some extra material added, or something different added to what we're doing. So these are questions that we each can answer for our own program. Do our courses speak sufficiently to our own needs and context? Or do they have a foreign feel about them? Just that's a perception. Do you get the feeling that it's all a little bit foreign? Or do you feel, yeah, this really fits our people and our needs? These are questions worth asking. Do our courses help the students grow spiritually and develop practical life and ministry skills, as well as giving them information? Remember our little split rail fence? I put three rails on that rather than the original 2, because I think we need a balance in all 3 areas. Here's an important one too. Do our courses help students to develop critical thinking and creative problem-solving skills? One of the things they need to be able to do is when an issue arises, and there are many modern issues that are not directly addressed in Scripture. So the students need to be able to work out how to approach the Scriptures and find principles, find teachings that will help them to solve particular problems that arise. So very often we teach Bible books and we teach them how to apply the teachings to modern life. Very important. But we also need to teach them when they have a new problem that isn't directly addressed, how can they go to the Scriptures and find help and answers to what they need. And that's a bit of a different skill to just application of verses that you read. So it's worth thinking about that. Do our courses help students interpret and use the Bible wisely? I think a basic how to study the Bible or hermeneutics is very important because, as all of you know, it's easy to find churches where the Bible is used in very strange ways. And sometimes all sorts of teachings come out that are not really biblical. So learning to use the Bible wisely and adequately should be an important course, how to study the Bible, and then reinforced in our other subjects, I think. And has anything else significant in our situation changed? Because if so, we might need an extra course somewhere, or we might need to take one out or change one, contextualize one better, whatever. I think a very important part of a curriculum is what I call open spaces. That not everything is predetermined, that you just do X, Y, Z. If possible, there needs to be some either electives, which some of you have, or some open spaces within the subjects where they can work on a particular topic that is important to them, or they can do some assignment work that relates to their needs in the context of that subject. So I call those open elements. And adults respond well when courses meet their felt needs. And so not having everything predetermined, but allowing some possibility for people to follow their particular ministry goals, their particular needs, is good. Do we have something like that, some open elements in our courses? And you might wish to add other questions of your own. Perhaps a question is, are we seeking accreditation? If so, that may bring some big changes. Accreditation is a two-edged sword. It can be very good, very helpful, and I know ATA, with whom I worked a few years back, does some good work in accreditation that fits our needs. But in other ways, accreditation is sometimes strangles what we might want to do. And TE has been freer to develop than a lot of the college courses. Students often want an accredited award, but in other places they don't care about that. They just want to study the Bible and minister better. So, what are the needs? And all of those, your answers to the questions will help you decide whether your curriculum might benefit from an overhaul. If you're satisfied when you look through the questions with your own curriculum, or perhaps it's not practical to make any changes at present, then you need do no more. But if you believe that you could improve your curriculum, we've given you several steps that could help. Go to the basic curriculum design model, and again, have a careful analysis of the situation as it is now. The target group that you would hope to reach now, which might be different from 5 or 10 years ago. Might be. You're the only ones who know that, so have a look. A current survey of church and community needs might be good. If you haven't had some clear objectives for your program, perhaps this is a good time to write some. If you do have some, are you meeting them, or do you want to change the objectives? So using that model again and thinking about it as you go. And if you want to rewrite your objectives, then for a moment, forget your present courses and your present objectives and write as if you were starting anew again. And then compare with what you have. So it's just a way of getting us to think about our situation now, because many of us started some years ago. Then, if you analyse your present courses and their content carefully, with your newly stated objectives, your new situation, that will help to decide, what can we do? Have we got some gaps, some holes? Could we fill them by adding some lessons to existing courses? Maybe we don't need a whole new course. Maybe we could just add a lesson or two that we write ourselves, or change something. That might be sufficient. Or perhaps we need some new courses. Would it do to import and translate, or do we need someone to write something locally for us? And when you figure out what changes, if any, would be good, maybe it's a wish list at first. We would like to be able to do these things. We can't do them right now, but we'll keep that list for the future and try to work towards it. That's fine too. But remember that ideally, each major cultural area would have at least several courses that are designed for their own context. So that's the ideal. And then we need to decide how we might implement changes. And it's a good idea to work out a timetable for completion and a budget. And then when we implement changes after a time, we should always evaluate, how are we doing? Are we reaching our own goals? Are our graduates growing and developing as we wish? Because the basic model is a recycling one over time, continuing improvement. A little bit like the church ever reforming in terms of scripture. So our curriculum will probably need to change from time to time. Graham Chips here introduced me yesterday to an interesting book, and I just put the title up there, but it's just an education book. But this writer mentions what he calls backwards course design. It's not all that different from what I've said to you, but the idea is really starting, when you're modifying a course, you could start with where your graduates are now where the people are now and then work backwards. Is this what we're happy with? If not, do we need to change our objectives or go back to the situation analysis? So we do have an interactive model, but sometimes it's helpful to work backwards from what we have now to what we might need to change in order to really get the curriculum we want. None of us can have an ideal curriculum. And so it's always, there are always constraints. But the idea is to have the best one that we can. We've just got a little bit of time now, and you might like to again meet with people from your region or cultural area, which is probably best, and have a look at some of the questions that are in the paper and just ask yourself, do these questions relate to any needs for change in your curriculum? How would you answer some of those questions? Would you add some other questions? I haven't got all the questions you could ask. And using the basic model, do you see any needs for change, any gaps in your curriculum? And we'll have another presentation a little later about filling some of those gaps. But you might like to just ask yourselves about your program some of the questions that are in this little paper, and you might come away very happy. We're doing just what we want, it's great. Or you might come away, we need to change a couple of things, ideally. Maybe not next week, maybe next year or the year after, but we want to work towards that. Okay?